In 1954, a coal miner's wife in the hollers above Hazard, Kentucky, kept a single cast iron pot on her stove from Monday morning until Saturday night. She fed her 4 children for the entire week on what most American families would have thrown away. Today, that same family would spend $40 on broth that lasts 3 days. Number 14 on this list is so old it predates the Civil War, and food historians believe half of working-class America ate it at least once a week. Number 8 used a single hambone that fed 9 pots of soup over 21 days. It cost 11 cents. Number 3 contains a fermentation step that food scientists now call lost forever. The recipe was kept entirely in their mothers' heads. These 25 soups were not just dinners. They were how mothers said, "I love you" on weeks when there was nothing else to say it with. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten poor man soups American mothers made from almost nothing. Number 25. Number 25. Tomato soup with milk. In 1953, a working-class mother in Cleveland could feed 5 children for 9 cents a bowl. 1 can of Campbell's condensed tomato soup, 1 pint of whole milk, a pat of butter, a pinch of black pepper. The whole pot was on the table in 7 minutes. The milk turned the broth velvet pink. The butter floated on top in slow gold coins. Children dipped saltine crackers into it the way their grandfathers had once dipped hardtack into wartime coffee. Today, almost no American family makes it the old way. The whole milk has been swapped for 2%. The saltines come from a snack bag. The mother who stood at the stove stirring it back from a near boil. Most working-class kitchens no longer have that mother standing there at all. Number 24. Cream of mushroom soup. Before it became the casserole binder of every church potluck in America, cream of mushroom soup was a pot of its own. Mothers added a half cup of leftover roast beef gravy and stretched a single can into a meal for 7. The mushrooms were canned button mushrooms, sliced and gray. The cream was evaporated milk thinned with the can water. The whole pot cost about 38 cents in 1956. Most American children today have only ever met cream of mushroom soup as the gluey middle layer of a green bean casserole. They will never know the bowl their grandmothers ate it from on a Tuesday night in February, when the windows were fogged and the radiator was knocking. Number 23. Cream of celery soup, the forgotten sister of the cream soup family. Made from the celery hearts and leaves working-class mothers had already used in a stew the night before. Nothing was wasted in those kitchens. The leaves went into the broth. The strings went into the broth. The bitter ribs went into the broth. Mothers thickened it with a spoon of flour stirred into the bacon grease left over from breakfast, salt, and a single grind of black pepper. The result was thin, fragrant, and strangely sweet. A 1955 mother in Akron, and there were thousands of them, even if you only ever heard about one, could feed a family of 6 on 1 head of celery, 1 onion, and a quart of milk. Today, the same head of celery costs more than that whole pot did then. Number 22. Working-class onion broth. Not French onion soup. The French version with the cheese and the toast and the brandy was a restaurant fantasy. Working-class onion broth was 3 yellow onions, 1 beef bouillon cube, 4 cups of water, and the patience to let it cook for 2 hours on the back burner. The onions melted into the broth. The kitchen smelled like sweet wood smoke. Mothers served it over a slice of stale bread that had been laid in the bottom of the bowl an hour before. In 1956, a Polish-American grandmother in Hamtramck, Detroit could feed 7 people on a pot like this for 19 cents. Her grandchildren remember the smell. Her great-grandchildren do not even know what onion broth is. Number 21. Cabbage soup. The Polish, Slovak, and Hungarian working-class kitchens of Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago kept a pot of cabbage soup on the stove from October through March. 1 head of green cabbage, 1 pound of cheap pork bones, a handful of caraway seeds, a whole shaved carrot, a spoon of vinegar at the end. It was sour, it was hot, it was fragrant, and it cost about 24 cents to make in 1955. The bones came from the butcher who would have thrown them away. The cabbage came from the cellar where it had been stored since the fall harvest. A mother could refill the pot with water and another half head of cabbage on the third day, and again on the fifth. The same pot fed a family of 8 for an entire week. Today, almost no American grandchild of that mother knows how it tasted. Number 20. Vegetable beef broth with marrow bones. The butcher in 1954 would give marrow bones away free if you asked. Working-class mothers asked every Saturday. They roasted the bones for an hour, then simmered them with carrot tops, onion skins, celery leaves, and parsley stems for the rest of the afternoon. The broth came out gold and trembling. A spoonful of it could revive a sick child faster than aspirin. Doctors in 1956 wrote prescriptions for it. Today, the marrow bones cost $9 a pound at the boutique butcher. The mother who knew how to ask for them free is gone. So is the butcher who would have known what she meant. Number 19. Lentil soup. The Sicilian-American widow in Federal Hill, Providence, kept a pound of brown lentils in a glass jar on the highest shelf of her pantry from 1952 until she died in 1978. She replaced it once a year. The jar fed 12 grandchildren over the course of those decades. Lentil soup was 3 things. The lentils, a sliced sausage end the butcher had set aside for her, and a single bay leaf. Cooked for 90 minutes in salted water until the lentils softened into the broth. Her great-grandchildren today eat lentils only out of cans. They do not know that a pound of dry lentils cost 15 cents in 1955 and could feed a family of 7 for 2 suppers. The recipe was never written down. It died on the highest shelf of that pantry. Number 18. Split pea soup with ham hock. Sunday's hambone became Monday's pea soup, and Monday's pea soup leftovers became Tuesday's lunch. A 2-pound bag of split peas cost 23 cents in 1955. The ham hock came free with last week's smoked ham from the Polish butcher in South Bend, Indiana. The peas dissolved into a thick green-gold porridge after 3 hours on the stove. Mothers added a handful of diced carrot in the last 20 minutes. They served it over a slice of dark rye bread. By 1975, almost no American mother under 30 knew how to crack a ham hock. By 2005, almost no butcher would have known what one was. Split pea soup the old way is one of the recipes that simply walked out of American kitchens and never came back. Number 17. Pinto bean soup. The Tex-Mex working-class kitchens of San Antonio, El Paso, and Albuquerque made pinto bean soup 3 times a week. 1 pound of dry pintos, 1 smoked ham hock, 1 yellow onion, a handful of cilantro stems, salt at the end, never at the start because salt added too early kept the beans hard. The beans cooked for 4 hours over low heat. The broth turned the color of weak coffee. Mothers served it with a wedge of cornbread cooked in a cast-iron skillet that had not been washed since 1942. In 1956, the whole pot fed 9 people for $1.04. Today, the cornbread comes from a mix and the beans come from a can, and almost no one remembers that you should never salt the pot at the beginning. Number 16. Mock chicken noodle soup. There was no chicken in mock chicken noodle soup. That was the point. Working-class mothers in Buffalo, Youngstown, and Cleveland on payday -3 made it with 2 beef bouillon cubes, a finely diced yellow onion, a sliced carrot, and a handful of dry egg noodles, a teaspoon of dried parsley at the end. The noodles soaked up the broth. The carrot turned the soup faintly orange. The whole bowl tasted like chicken soup if you closed your eyes and remembered. That was always the trick, to remember harder than the food was real. In 1955, the pot cost about 11 cents to make and fed 5 children to bed without complaint. Today, almost no American mother under 50 knows that a working-class household could feed a child a bowl of chicken-flavored hope on the day before payday and call it dinner. Number 15. Buttermilk soup. The Scandinavian and German farmsteads of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and South Dakota made buttermilk soup hot in winter and cold in summer. 1 quart of soured buttermilk, 1 tablespoon of flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, a pinch of cardamom or grated nutmeg. Bring slowly to a simmer, never to a boil, or it would curdle. The soup came out tangy, faintly sweet, and almost custard thin. Mothers ladled it over toasted dark bread cubes for dinner, or over fresh strawberries for a Sunday treat in July. The recipe came over from Norway and Germany in 1890. By 1955, almost every grandmother in the upper Midwest could make it without measuring. By 2010, the recipe had simply vanished. Most American grandchildren today do not even know that soured buttermilk used to be a meal. Number 14. Bread soup. This is the one. Number 14 is so old it predates the Civil War. Pennsylvania Dutch farm wives have been making bread soup since the 1700s. A quart of milk, 6 slices of stale rye bread, 2 eggs beaten in, a pinch of cinnamon, a spoon of butter, cooked in a cast iron pot over low heat until the bread melted into the milk, and the whole pot smelled like a bakery and a barn at the same time. It was breakfast in some farms, supper in others. In 1956, a Lancaster County mother could feed 11 people on 3 slices of stale bread and a quart of milk for under 15 cents. Food historians estimate that bread soup was eaten at least once a week by half of all working-class rural Americans between 1860 and 1960. The recipe was never written down because nobody thought it needed to be. Today, almost no American under 30 has ever tasted it. They will not know what their great-grandmothers tasted on the cold Tuesday nights of their entire childhoods. Number 13. Mushroom barley soup. The Jewish American kitchens of Brooklyn, the Bronx, and the Lower East Side made mushroom barley soup every Friday afternoon for the Sabbath supper. 1 cup of pearl barley, a handful of dried porcini mushrooms reconstituted in the soaking water, a diced onion, 2 carrots, salt and pepper at the end. The soup cooked for 2 hours. The barley swelled and gave up its starch. The dried mushrooms turned the broth nearly black. Mothers served it before the brisket. Some families made it the entire meal. In 1955, a New York working-class Jewish mother could feed 12 people on this pot for 90 cents. The pearl barley came from the bulk bin at the kosher grocer. The dried mushrooms came in a small paper sack from the same shelf where they had sat for 40 years. Number 12. Coffee soup. The Appalachian breakfast that nobody talks about anymore. A bowl of strong black coffee, a slice of stale biscuit broken into cubes, a tablespoon of brown sugar, a splash of canned milk, stirred together and eaten with a spoon while the kitchen wood stove was still warming. In 1953, the whole bowl cost about 2 cents. It was breakfast for the children whose father had already left for the mine at 4 in the morning. The biscuit was always from yesterday. The coffee was always from the pot left on the back burner overnight. Most American children today would refuse coffee soup if you put it in front of them. Their grandparents from the Kentucky and West Virginia hollers ate it 3 mornings a week for the first 15 years of their lives. The recipe is one of the most quietly American things ever cooked, and it is gone. Number 11. Egg drop soup. Not the Chinese restaurant version, the working-class American kitchen version. 1 quart of chicken bouillon made from 2 cubes. A teaspoon of cornstarch dissolved in cold water, 2 eggs beaten in a measuring cup, a handful of frozen peas, 3 sliced green onions, if the family had them. Mothers brought the broth to a simmer, stirred in the cornstarch, then drizzled in the beaten eggs in a slow stream, while stirring with a fork. The eggs cooked instantly into golden ribbons. The whole pot was ready in 8 minutes. In 1956, a Cleveland mother could feed 6 children on this for 14 cents. Their Chinese-American neighbors taught it to her in 1952, over a fence on Eddy Road. The recipe traveled across cultures the way good, cheap recipes always have. Then it stopped traveling. Today, almost no American working-class kitchen still has that recipe in it. Number 10. Cornmeal mush soup. The Appalachian working-class breakfast is dinner. A cup of yellow cornmeal whisked into 4 cups of boiling salted water, cooked over low heat for 30 minutes until it thickened into a thin polenta, then thinned again with milk to make it a soup. A tablespoon of bacon grease stirred in at the end, a splash of molasses on top. The soup came out gold and gray and faintly sweet. Children ate it with a spoon, then drank the last of it from the bowl. Mothers in 1955 could make a pot for 4 cents and feed a family of 7 with 1 cup of cornmeal. The yellow cornmeal came from the local mill, ground from the corn that had been grown 3 counties over. The molasses came from the same general store where the mother had charged $1 worth of groceries against next Friday's pay. Almost no American grandchild of that mother knows what cornmeal mush soup tastes like. The mill is closed. The general store is a gas station now. Number 9. Mock turtle soup. There was no turtle. The whole point of mock turtle soup was that it tasted like an expensive Philadelphia restaurant dish, but the working-class kitchen made it from cow brains, beef tongue, and a quart of strong beef stock. By 1955, most working-class mothers had quietly switched to ground beef and a hard-boiled egg, but the original recipe still lived in some German-American kitchens of Cincinnati and St. Louis. The soup came out dark, herbal, and slightly sweet from the addition of a tablespoon of sherry, the only luxury in the pot. Mothers served it at Sunday supper for company. In 1955, a St. Louis mother could feed 12 guests on a pot of mock turtle soup for 60 cents. The cow brains cost her 3 cents. The tongue was the leftover from the previous Sunday supper. The recipe took her 4 hours, and she did it without measuring. Today, mock turtle soup is on no menu in America. The mothers who knew it have all gone, and they took the recipe with them. Number 8. Hambone soup. This is the one. Number 8 is the soup that proves you could feed a family on almost nothing if you knew what to do with a single bone. The Christmas ham was eaten on December 25th in 1953. The bone was wrapped in butcher paper and placed in the icebox. On December 28th, a coal miner's wife in eastern Kentucky simmered that bone in a gallon of water with a bay leaf and a spoon of black pepper for 4 hours. The first pot was hambone soup with white beans. She served it on the 29th. The bone went back in the icebox. On January 2nd, she simmered it again for 3 more hours with cabbage. That was pot 2. The bone went back. Pot 3 was barley. Pot 4 was lentils. Pot 5 was potato. Pot 6 was carrot and onion. Pot 7 was just bone broth. By the time pot 9 came around on January 18th, the bone was nearly hollow and the broth was nearly clear, but it still tasted like Christmas. The whole 21 days of soup cost the family 11 cents in additional ingredients. Today, almost no working-class American kitchen has a ham bone in the icebox at all. Number 7. Hopped John soup. The black Southern working-class New Year's tradition that became a year-round survival meal. 1 pound of dry black-eyed peas, 1 smoked ham hock, 1 cup of long-grain rice, 1 yellow onion, a handful of greens stirred in at the end if greens were available. Cooked for 2.5 hours until the peas softened and the rice swelled in the pot liquor. A black grandmother in Charleston, South Carolina in 1955 could feed her family of 9 on this pot for 38 cents. The peas came from the bulk bin at the colored grocery. The rice came from the same place. The ham hock came free with last month's smoked ham, and the greens came from the back garden. The recipe traveled with the Great Migration to Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago. Then it slowly stopped traveling. Today, Hopped John survives mostly as a New Year's superstition. Almost no black grandchild knows that her grandmother used to make this soup 3 Tuesdays a month for actual dinner, not for luck. Number 6. Mock bisque. A working-class American kitchen could not afford lobster in 1955, so mothers made mock bisque from 1 can of tomato soup, 1 can of cream of celery soup, a half cup of canned milk, a single can of tuna fish, and a tablespoon of sherry stirred in at the very end. Cooked together for 15 minutes over low heat, the soup came out coral pink, savory, and faintly seafoodish. Mothers served it with a small handful of oyster crackers floating on top. Children believed they were eating something fancy. They were correct. They were eating something fancy. In 1956, a Long Island working-class mother could feed 7 people on a pot of mock bisque for 42 cents. The recipe was traded between mothers at the school pickup line. Today, almost no American mother has ever heard of mock bisque. The grandchildren of the women who invented it are now eating canned lobster bisque from Whole Foods at $14 a pint. Number 5. Beer soup. The German immigrant kitchens of Milwaukee, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh kept a recipe for beer soup that came across the ocean on the Hamburg-American line in 1870. By 1954, almost no German-American mother under 50 would admit to making it because beer soup felt like an old country embarrassment. But the working-class grandmothers still made it for their husbands when those husbands came home from the steel mill in winter shaking with cold. 1 bottle of cheap dark beer, 2 egg yolks, a tablespoon of flour, a pat of butter, a pinch of cinnamon, and a pinch of salt, heated slowly in a heavy iron pot until the beer foamed and the egg yolks thickened the whole thing into a warm amber custard, served over toasted dark rye bread floating in the bottom of the bowl. A steel worker's mother in Pittsburgh in 1955 made a pot of beer soup for her son when he came home blue-fingered from the open hearth. The whole pot cost 19 cents. He ate it standing up at the kitchen counter with his coat still on. He did not say anything. He did not have to. His grandchildren today drink craft beer from a bottle that costs $8. None of them know that their great-grandmother once warmed their grandfather back to life with a 5-cent bottle of Iron City beer and 2 egg yolks. The recipe is gone. The grandmother is gone. The mill is gone. The pot is in a thrift store somewhere in Lawrenceville. Number 4. Schmaltz soup. The Jewish-American working-class soup of Brooklyn, the Bronx, and the Lower East Side. 1/4 cup of rendered chicken fat, schmaltz, saved over months in a glass jar in the icebox. 1 yellow onion sliced thin. 1 whole head of garlic, peeled. 3 quarts of water. A pound of egg noodles or homemade kreplach, if there had been time on Thursday. The schmaltz melted in the pot. The onion and garlic cooked slowly in it for 40 minutes until they turned the color of dark caramel. The water was added. The noodles went in last. Salt and white pepper at the end. In 1955, a Brooklyn working-class Jewish mother could feed her family of 6 on this soup for 31 cents. The schmaltz had been saved a tablespoon at a time from every chicken she had cooked since Rosh Hashanah. The garlic came from the Italian grocer 2 blocks over. The egg noodles came from the same grocer's brother-in-law who made them on Tuesday. Today, schmaltz comes in a small jar from the boutique deli at $12. The grandmothers who saved it tablespoon by tablespoon are mostly gone. Their granddaughters today eat chicken soup from a paper cup at the corner drugstore. They will never know what their grandmother's hand-saved chicken fat soup tasted like. The recipe was a year-long act of love, and almost no one performs it anymore. Number 3. Pottage with wild greens. This is the soup that food scientists now call lost forever. Number 3 contains a fermentation step that no modern food laboratory has been able to replicate, because the step depended on the specific ambient yeast of a single working-class kitchen, kept warm by a continuously burning coal stove for 8 months of the year. The Pennsylvania Dutch and Appalachian working-class kitchens of 1940 through 1955 kept a sourdough crock on the back of the stove. Into that crock went the cooking water from every pot of beans, the wilted tops of every cabbage, the soft outer leaves of every head of lettuce, and the bitter ends of every carrot. The crock fermented for weeks. The smell was sharp and yeasty and old. When a working-class mother needed to feed her family on a Tuesday in February with nothing in the pantry, she dipped a quart from that crock, added 2 cups of water, a handful of cornmeal, and a pinch of salt. She simmered it for 40 minutes. The result was a thick, sour, complex pottage that contained more living probiotics than any modern wellness drink. The grandmother who taught the recipe to her daughter in 1953 did not know the word probiotic. She knew that the soup made her family strong and that her family had been making it that way since they had crossed the Atlantic in 1740. The crock was thrown out when the mother died in 1978. The yeast culture, which had lived continuously for 238 years, died with her. Modern food scientists have tried to rebuild it. They have failed. They will keep failing. The kitchen no longer exists. The stove no longer exists. The mother no longer exists. The pottage is gone. Number 2, bone marrow broth, the slowest soup in working-class America. The mothers who made it the old way knew that you cannot rush a marrow bone. 2 pounds of beef marrow bones from the butcher who would have thrown them away, a halved yellow onion, a bay leaf, a teaspoon of black peppercorns, a splash of apple cider vinegar to draw the calcium and the gelatin out of the bones. The pot went on the back burner at 6 in the morning. It simmered for 14 hours. The kitchen filled with the smell of beef and roasted vegetables and something deeper, the smell of bone giving up its marrow into water. By 8 at night, the broth was the color of strong tea and trembled like silk. A Detroit auto worker's mother in 1954 made this broth every Sunday from October to April. Her 7 children drank a cup before bed all winter. Not one of them caught pneumonia between 1952 and 1963. The doctor said it was because she was lucky. She knew it was because of the broth. Today, bone broth comes in a Tetra Pak at the grocery store at $9 a quart. The grandmothers who simmered it for 14 hours on the back burner of a coal stove are mostly gone. The auto worker is gone. The Detroit factory is gone. The 7 children who drank it are now in their 70s, and a few of them still try to make it, but they all admit that it does not taste the way it tasted in their mother's kitchen. Number 1, the sick soup mother made. This is the soup that almost every working-class American above the age of 50 remembers. It does not have a single name. Some families called it Jewish penicillin. Some families called it hot toddy soup. Some families just called it the soup mother makes when you are sick. The recipe was simple, and it was different in every house. A pot of chicken broth made from the carcass left over from Sunday's roast. Some carrots, some celery, some egg noodles, a handful of parsley, sometimes a beaten egg, sometimes a little garlic, sometimes a squeeze of lemon at the end. What mattered was not the recipe. What mattered was that your mother made it for you. She brought it to your bedroom on a tray with a folded napkin and a glass of ginger ale. She put her cool hand on your forehead. She told you to eat what you could and leave the rest. She sat on the edge of the bed and waited. In 1955, that bowl of soup cost about 11 cents to make. The carcass would have been thrown away. The carrots were soft from the bottom of the icebox. The noodles were the broken ones at the bottom of the box. None of it mattered. What mattered was that the steam touched your face when she lifted the spoon. What mattered was that the broth tasted like she had stayed up worrying about you. What mattered was that she stayed at the edge of the bed until you fell asleep. Most American children under 30 have not had their mother make this soup for them, because most American mothers under 60 do not know how to make it from scratch, because their mothers did not teach them, because their mothers were too tired, because the world had already started moving too fast for the recipe to fit in it anymore. If you are old enough to remember the bowl on the tray and the cool hand on the forehead and the mother sitting on the edge of the bed, you are the last generation in American history that will remember it. The recipe is mostly gone. The mother is mostly gone. The soup, almost no one is making the soup anymore. But you are, or you can be. The carcass is still in your icebox. The carrots are still in the bottom drawer. The noodles are still in the cabinet. And there is still someone in your house who would be moved beyond words if you brought them a bowl of it on a tray. These were not just soups. They were how mothers said, "I love you," when there was nothing else to say it with. When you make one of these for yourself alone in a quiet kitchen with no one to share it with, it still works. The steam still rises. The broth still warms. The bone still gives up its marrow into the water. And somewhere in the smell of the pot, you remember that you are worth the trouble of cooking. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week, just one. Maybe the bread soup, maybe the cornmeal mush, maybe just bone broth on the back burner all Sunday afternoon while the rain comes down outside. I want to know if the hambone soup gets more love than the pottage. Tell me down in the comments which one your mother used to make. Tell me what she called it. Tell me where she stood when she stirred it. If you have a grandmother who remembers, call her before you make it, not after. Call her first. The window for asking is smaller than any of us would like to believe. These are not lost recipes. They are waiting recipes, waiting for someone to remember they were worth making in the first place.